Edwynn Houk, the owner of Edwynn Houk Gallery in New York and Zurich. Probably the most significant trend that I've noticed in the field is the expansion of the number of people who collect photography, and much of that coming from collectors of contemporary art, more than people who would be, say, exclusively collectors of photography, which had been the case for many years. And as each year goes by, it seems more and more collectors of contemporary painting, sculpture, video, work like that also include photography, both by people who would call themselves photographers or those who simply employ photographic materials but would just consider themselves contemporary artists. We're bringing a lot of work by living artists that the gallery represents. We're bringing quite a selection of vintage work, which we're probably best known for is really the identity of the gallery. So work from Man Ray's iconic 1930s image of Dora Maar to Walker Evans and Manuel Alvarez Bravo, Dorothea Lange, Robert Frank. Probably the work we're most excited by, that we're most proud of, is the iconic image of Dora Maar, done by Man Ray in the 1930s, with the surrealist inclusion of the little hands, puppet hands, doll hands underneath. And it's a very rare image. It's one that comes from the former collection of the surrealist André Breton. So it has a very significant history and background. And it's really one of the key images of Man Ray's Paris years, and within the surrealist movement, of which Man Ray was such a key figure. Man Ray was, I think, particularly significant for pushing the boundaries in photography far beyond what had been practiced before. And it encompasses things like the photogram, which was a cameraless image made by painting with light or exposing photographic paper to light, either with objects that were totally opaque or semi-opaque or moving. Solarizations, which would be re-exposing negatives or paper to light again during the development process, or simply through the juxtaposition and composition of surrealist images like the Dora Maar portrait. And his goal in cases like that, I think, was to take something that had meaning and resonance at a symbolic level, at a perhaps even subconscious level, that people could recognize. Is very hard to put into words, but the English translation of surrealism being above reality, that something was more real, really, than the visible world. Man Ray took a number of images of Dora Maar, which is not unusual within his career that he photographed someone a few times, but he had a very, very high percentage of great images or successes with Dora Maar. So one, I think, can only think that there was a little bit of back and forth, that it wasn't just her inspiration, but perhaps maybe even some active participation. I think certainly hands are very expressive, and we see it within art over the centuries, how often they're featured, they're incorporated in a prominent way, but that they really seem to express emotions or some inner sense. And in Dora Maar's case in particular, there's the famous story of how she met Picasso at the cafe, and at a large dinner party where Versailles was in attendance, he told me, she took a steak knife and began to outline her hand, then stab in between the fingers, and generally striking in between the fingers, but very frequently hitting her fingers until they were covered in blood. And Picasso began to notice casually, then he was riveted, and came to him later and said, "Who is this woman?" So somehow it seems, given that story, the significance of Picasso to her life, the prominence of the hand in the story, that it either was part of the motivation of Man Ray or it was something to do with Dora Maar herself that really inspired, suggested this image. I hope to see you in Miami.